Morning. Well, listening to all that is the woman who will have to get the Scottish budget through Holyrood. The Scottish Finance Secretary, Shona Robinson, is in our Dundee studio. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. Good morning to you.
Good morning. So
an angry Green Party for so long your friends and partners. What do you make of what you just heard from Lorna Slater?
Well, look, I'm keen to build as broad a support for the budget in the Scottish Parliament as I can, and we're talking to the other parties in good faith, including the Scottish Greens, and we'll continue to do that. We are going to have another round of discussions where we've asked all the parties to come back to us with specific proposals. Now, clearly, we'll also have to have dialogue with all the parties about how those proposals will be funded. So we are entering into these discussions in good faith, as Lorna Slater called for, and that will be my intention going forward.
Right, I want to get to the budget dialogue in a minute. First of all, let me ask you about the National Care Service, though. With the Greens now coming out and saying that they are minded to vote against this, the local authorities have said the same, the unions have said the same, and all your other opponents in Parliament have said the same. This policy is now dead, is it not?
Well, I thought it was interesting. Lorna Slater talked about listening to voices, and one of the voices that really hasn't been heard as much as it perhaps should have been is the voices of disabled people and carers and those who are service users who rely on social care services, who are very clear they want to see a national care service. And as someone who used to work in care services, I understand very well the importance of having things like standards of quality, national standards of quality that apply across the board, so we don't see a difference in one area to another. Now, in terms of where we go from here, it's important that we continue to talk to the other parties, but I really hope that in all of this, the voices of those who rely on our services are perhaps heard a bit more.
Yeah, no, sure, but the politics of this is what matters when you're trying to get this through Parliament, and unless you're going to change the policy, it's not going to pass, is it? Because all of your opponents have now said they won't back it and you don't have the numbers. So is the National Care Service plan dead, or is it going to have to change significantly?
Well, look, we'll continue to discuss with the other parties and stakeholders about where there is potential room for compromise. I think there's some really important principles in the National Care Service, that point about national standards of quality. It's hard to see how anyone could disagree with wanting to have national standards so that people who in one part of Scotland receive the same quality of service as in another. I don't understand why anyone would disagree with that. So, there will inevitably have to be areas of compromise here, but I really hope that on the principles and those voices in support of the National Care Service will perhaps be listened to a little bit more.
Sure. I mean, it's not the idea, though, here. I mean, I think a lot of people agree broadly on the framework of the idea. It's the specific plan here. Just very briefly, Shona Robinson, is your government prepared to change its plan?
Well, look, we'll have to look at the compromises that can be made where we want to move forward with the plan. Clearly, we will have to get support for that. So clearly, there will have to be compromise. But I come back to the principles here. I really hope that there can be agreement around the principles of the National Care Service, because they, at the heart of this, are people who receive care services, and their voices have been pretty clear. They want the National Care Service to move forward.
All right, let me ask you about the budget. You say you're in dialogue, constructive dialogue with all parties. Just tell me how that's going. I mean, we just heard from the Greens there. Perhaps, well, certainly historically, your most likely allies in all of this, that you're going to have to go quite a long way if you're going to get their votes. How much compromise are you going to have to make, and where do you see agreement coming from? Who's the most likely ally now?
Well, look, as I said at the beginning, we are working to form and build as broad a support for this budget as we can. So we're entering those discussions. We've already had one round in good faith with all the parties. We've asked for the second round to focus a bit more specifically on the asks that are important to each of the parties. And Scottish Greens, of course, there's a lot we have in common. Lorna Slater mentioned the asylum seeker bus passes, and of course we had a debate about that, and we agreed in principle that we would introduce that before the end of this parliamentary session. So there's lots of areas of agreement, but there's lots of areas of agreement with other parties as well. And my aim here as a minority government is to try and build as broad a coalition for support in the budget as possible. Now,
would you work with anybody? Would you work with any party? If it was the Tories who wanted to break bread with you, would you sit down and break bread with them, or Labour?
Well, look, I've entered into discussions with all parties in good faith. So I'm not going to then start to exclude anyone from that process. What will be important, though, is what we have at our disposal to be able to support the budget. That, of course, will by and large be set next Wednesday when we hear what the Chancellor has to say. So we need to see that investment in public services, an end to austerity, the investment in infrastructure. And I know these are things that are important across the political divide in the Scottish Parliament. So as I said, we'll enter into the next round of discussions in good faith, and we'll start to discuss some of the detail of what's important to each of the political parties.
Yeah, a lot to discuss about Wednesday. First, though, just one more specific, if you don't mind. Lorna Slater said you won't get Green votes unless you scrap the council tax freeze. Might you do that? Well,
I've said in answer to that I, of course, will want to set out our position on taxation and local taxation as part of the budget process. We've been having very constructive, detailed discussions with COSLA around what the local government settlement, which of course will be a package, it won't be just one thing, it will be a package of measures. So that will form, the decision on the council tax will form part of that package.
So you're not committed at this stage to maintaining the freeze on council tax?
Well, I'm not going to announce one element of a package of measures around local government funding in advance of the budget. That wouldn't be sensible.
We'll free up a lot of money for you if you did lift that freeze, wouldn't it? Well,
we'll look at that in the round as part of a package. What I do agree with is that we need to make sure that local government, as well as all of our other public services, get the support that they require. Now, of course, we did deliver a real terms increase to local government funding, as confirmed by the Accounts Commission and indeed the Scottish Parliament Information Service as well. So there has been real terms. Despite all the headwinds and difficult financial challenges, we have supported local government with a real terms increase in funding. But I do understand the pressures, understand them very well, and we'll take that discussion forward with COSLA in the appropriate manner.
I'm sure. Listen, just quickly, Rachel Reeves, obviously, we're told that this could be the most consequential budget in perhaps a lifetime on Wednesday. What are you looking for from it?
Well, we're looking for an end to austerity, first and foremost. We're looking for investment in public services. We're looking for investment in infrastructure, because investment in infrastructure will help us to grow the economy. It will help us to invest in net zero commitments, which we want to do. And it will help us to tackle poverty through investments like affordable housing. So,
is that your priority? If you get more money in consequentials from this budget, is affordable housing where that money's going to go?
I've already made clear, Martin, that affordable housing will be one of our top priorities for investment of capital funding. But we also need to see revenue funding in order to make sure our public services can be sustained, that we can meet the pay deals that are important to keep our public services going, and we value our the people who work in our public services very much. And we need to make sure in that regard that the NI employers' contribution increase is fully met for Scotland with our higher level of public services and indeed our higher levels of pay. And that's, of course, what I've written to the Chancellor about this weekend.
OK, we're going to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for being with us this morning.